My name is Elena Harper, and I was 35 the Christmas Eve my entire family chose to celebrate without me. I had spent 3 full days turning my townhouse in Colorado Springs into something out of a Hallmark movie. The tree stood 10 feet tall in the corner, covered in the same silver ornaments my grandfather Walter and I had hung together every year since I was little. I'd set the long oak table with my grandmother's lace tablecloth 8 places, each with a small handwritten card and a tiny wrapped gift I'd chosen months in advance. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon, vanilla, and fresh pine. In the oven, a prime rib was resting under foil, and on the counter sat the spiced sugar cookies I'd baked, using the exact recipe Grandpa always said tasted like home. I wanted it to be perfect. Not because I was showing off, but because for once I hoped they would look at the table and think, Elena belongs here. But at 6:30 the first text came in. My brother Marcus, hey sis, something came up with the kids, rain check? Then my sister Lauren, we're doing a small thing at Mom's this year, sorry. And one by one, the excuses rolled in like snowflakes that refused to stick. My stepmother Victoria sent a single heart emoji and nothing else. By 7 o'clock, every chair at my beautifully set table remained empty. The candles burned lower, the cookies stayed untouched. I sat at the head of the table in the dress I'd bought just for this night, fork in hand, and ate alone while soft Christmas music played in the background. If you've ever poured your heart into making someone feel loved, only to realize they never planned to show up, you already know how heavy that silence feels. I told myself it was fine. I was used to it. For 33 years I had been the reliable one, the useful one, the daughter-shaped helper who never asked for too much and always brought the pie. But that night, something inside me cracked in a new way. I was halfway through clearing the cold plates when the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass I saw a hunched figure dusted with snow. I opened the door and there stood Grandpa Walter, 80 years old, no coat, thin white hair catching the porch light, breathing hard from the short walk from his old Buick. They told me you weren't hosting this year, he said quietly, snow melting on his shoulders. But I saw the lights on and I counted the cars at Victoria's house. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the way family should. His eyes moved over the perfectly set table, the 8 empty chairs, the gifts still sitting untouched. Something in his face shifted, the same look he used to give me when I was small, and trying too hard to earn a smile from the rest of them. Without another word, he reached into the inside pocket of his worn cardigan and pulled out a thick, yellowed envelope. The edges were soft from years of being carried. He pressed it into my hands, his fingers cold but steady. I should have given you this a long time ago, sweetheart, he whispered. Your mother Caroline made me promise. I was a coward who kept that promise to everyone but you. I had never heard the name Caroline spoken in our family, not once in 35 years. That old envelope felt heavier than it should have. I thought being left alone on Christmas Eve was the worst thing they could do to me. I was wrong. Inside that envelope waited the truth that would change everything. About who I really was, about the money they had been quietly taking, and about the family that had spent decades making sure I never knew I had always belonged. By the time the snow melted that winter, 3 of them would wish I had never opened it. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women learn to speak with paper, patience, and the kind of truth that can't be shouted down. If you've ever felt like you had to earn your place at your own family's table, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and let me know you're here with me. And if this story has you leaning in already, hit subscribe. There's a lot more to tell. I stood there in my quiet living room, the envelope warm in my hands from Grandpa's touch, while the Christmas music kept playing like nothing had changed. But everything had. My name is Elena Harper. I'm 35 now, and for most of my life I worked as a forensic accountant in Colorado Springs, the person companies and families call when money starts disappearing, and no one wants to say it out loud. Funny how I spent my days uncovering other people's secrets while living inside the biggest one of my own. You see, I wasn't supposed to be an Avery by blood, at least that's what they told me. I came to the family when I was 2 years old, after a car accident on icy Highway 24. That was the story. I was the little girl they took in out of kindness, the charity case, the extra mouth at the table who should always remember how lucky she was. And I believed it. God, I believed it with everything in me. I learned early that love in that house had to be earned. Every single day. I was the one who brought home straight A's while my brother Marcus got praised for barely passing. I was the one who helped Victoria with taxes every April, stayed late cooking Sunday dinners, and never once complained when my Christmas gifts were hand-me-downs or practical things like new socks. I smiled through it all because I thought if I could just be useful enough, excellent enough, invisible enough in my needs, maybe one day they would look at me and say, she belongs. But they never did. If you've ever felt like the guest who overstayed their welcome in your own family, you know how exhausting that quiet performance is. You learn to read the temperature of every room. You laugh a little softer, you take up a little less space. You become the perfect supporting character in someone else's story. Grandpa Walter was the only exception. He never made me earn anything. From the time I was small, he would pull me onto his lap in his old leather chair and tell me stories about the mountains, about patience, about how the strongest trees grow in the wind. He called me my girl in a way that made my chest feel warm even on the coldest days. Every fall we'd bake spiced sugar cookies together in his kitchen, the same recipe that filled my house tonight. His big hands guiding my small ones as we rolled the dough, the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg wrapping around us like a hug. Those afternoons were the only times I ever felt truly wanted. The rest of the family tolerated me. Victoria, my stepmother, was always polite in public but careful in private. "We've done so much for you, Elena," she would say with that gentle smile that somehow still felt like a warning. Marcus and Lauren were nice enough when they needed something, a ride, help with homework, someone to watch their kids. But the moment I needed anything emotional, the door quietly closed. I told myself it was okay. I built a career around numbers because numbers don't lie and they don't play favorites. I bought my own townhouse. I learned to cook meals big enough for 8 even when only one chair was filled. I became the woman who fixes things, who shows up, who never asks for more than she's given. But that Christmas Eve, sitting alone at that beautiful table with the candles burning low, I finally felt the full weight of it. I wasn't just unloved. I had spent 33 years trying to earn a place that should have been mine by right. Grandpa watched me carefully as I held the envelope. His eyes were clearer than they had been in months, despite the stroke he suffered last spring. He lowered himself slowly into the chair beside me and placed his hand over mine. "Open it when you're ready," he said softly. "But know this, sweetheart, you were never the kindness they made you believe you were." I looked at the worn paper in my lap. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it over the Christmas music. Part of me wanted to put it away, to keep living in the story I had always known. But another part, the part that had spent years reading other people's hidden truths, knew I couldn't close this door. If you've ever stood at the edge of a truth that might break your heart but also set you free, you understand exactly how I felt in that moment. I took a slow breath, the same way I do before opening a client's messy financial records, and I slid my finger under the seal. 3 things slid out of that yellowed envelope and onto my lap like pieces of a puzzle I had never known existed. A faded photograph, a letter written in elegant, looping handwriting, and an official document with the raised seal of the state of Colorado. I picked up the photograph first. It showed a young woman with the same soft brown hair and quiet smile I see in my own mirror, holding a baby wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. Her eyes looked straight into the camera with a mix of exhaustion and fierce love. On the back, in Grandpa's careful handwriting, Caroline and Elena, February 1989. Caroline. My hands started to tremble. I had heard that name only once or twice in hushed conversations that stopped the moment I entered the room. I always assumed she was some distant relative. Never in my wildest dreams did I think she was my mother. Grandpa Walter sat beside me, his voice low and steady, the way it used to be when he taught me how to check the oil in his old Buick. "Caroline was my daughter," he said. "Your real mother, my youngest. She was 26 when she had you. She loved you more than anything in this world." The room felt suddenly smaller. The Christmas lights blurred through tears I refused to let fall. All those years of being told I was adopted out of pity, that I was lucky to have a roof and a family that took me in. All the careful reminders from Victoria that I should be grateful. They weren't just words, they were walls built to hide this truth. He continued gently, as if afraid the words might break me. "She was driving home to us that night on Highway 24, black ice. You were asleep in the back seat. The car hit a truck. Caroline didn't make it, but you came out without a scratch. A miracle, they called it." I looked down at the official document. It was my original birth certificate. Mother, Caroline Elizabeth Harper. Father, unknown. My name was already Elena Harper before anyone adopted me. I wasn't brought in from nowhere, I was brought home. A short, powerful memory surfaced then, one I hadn't thought about in years. I was maybe 6 years old, standing on a stool in Grandpa's kitchen. He placed an old silver locket around my neck. Inside was a tiny photo of Caroline smiling. "Keep this close, my girl," he whispered. It holds someone who loved you first. Victoria saw it later and told me it was just an old trinket I should put away so I wouldn't lose it. I never wore it again, but I kept it hidden in my jewelry box all these years. That locket was the first clue I never understood. Grandpa's eyes grew misty. After she passed, I was a widower, too old and broken to raise you alone. Victoria had just lost her own baby that same winter. The house was filled with grief. Raymond, my son, your uncle, and Victoria agreed to raise you. But she had one condition: never tell you the truth. She didn't want a ghost at her table. She wanted you grateful, not equal. The words landed like quiet thunder. All my life I had been shrinking myself to fit into a role they created, the helpful, undemanding, forever indebted daughter. I became excellent at my job, reliable to a fault, and emotionally self-sufficient because I believed that was the only way to earn the love they dangled just out of reach. But Grandpa never played that game. He was the one who showed up to every school event, even when Victoria said it wasn't necessary. He was the one who taught me how to bake those spiced sugar cookies. Caroline's recipe, he now told me. She made them every Christmas. The cardamom and nutmeg were her secret. I kept teaching you so a piece of her would stay alive in this family. Tears finally slipped down my cheeks. For the first time, I understood why those cookies always felt like coming home. They were never just cookies. They were my mother's hands reaching through time. If you've ever discovered that the love you fought so hard for was being rationed by people who were never supposed to gatekeep it, you know the strange mix of grief and anger that rises in your chest. It's heavy, but it's also clarifying. Grandpa squeezed my hand. I was a coward for too long, Elena. I let them hide you from your own story, but I'm not confused tonight. You deserve the truth, and there's more in that letter. I unfolded the letter with careful fingers. The paper was thin, the ink slightly faded, but the words felt alive. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home to you. I want you to know you were never a burden. You are the best thing I ever did. Your stubborn little chin and the way you grab my finger. I already know you're going to be strong. Daddy is holding a small trust for you. It's not much, but it's from me, so you never have to feel like anyone's charity. Stand tall, my love. You were wanted from the very first breath. Your mother, Caroline. I read it twice, then 3 times. In that moment, sitting at the table still set for a family that never came, something shifted inside me. The little girl who had spent decades trying to earn her seat finally met the woman she came from, and she was loved, truly, deeply, unconditionally loved. Grandpa watched me with quiet pride. Now you know who you are, sweetheart. The question is, what are you going to do with it? I didn't answer right away, but deep down I already felt the answer forming. I sat with Caroline's letter in my hands for what felt like hours, the Christmas lights casting soft shadows across the table. The spiced sugar cookies had gone cold beside me, but for the first time in my life, they didn't feel like a sad reminder. They felt like a bridge, a quiet connection from a mother I never got to know to the daughter she fought to protect. Grandpa Walter stayed with me that night. He didn't push or offer empty comfort. He simply sat there, an old man who had carried this secret for 33 years, and let me feel everything I needed to feel. When the tears finally slowed, he reached into the envelope one more time and pulled out a small folded note in his own younger handwriting. This is the part they really didn't want you to see, he said. It was a note about a trust fund. Caroline had scraped together every extra dollar she earned cleaning houses and working late shifts. She gave it to Grandpa to hold for me, so my daughter never has to beg for belonging. Over the years, Grandpa had quietly added to it whenever he could. It wasn't a fortune, but it was meant to be mine on my 30th birthday. A safety net, a piece of my real mother's love made tangible. And it was gone. The account statements Grandpa had managed to bring with him showed transfers starting shortly after his stroke last spring. Thousands of dollars moved out in loans and gifts, to Marcus for his new truck, to Lauren for her home renovation, and even larger amounts funneled through Victoria for family expenses. The trust that Caroline built with her own tired hands had been drained almost to nothing. The grief hit me like a wave, but underneath it rose something colder and sharper, clarity. All those years of Victoria's gentle reminders. We've sacrificed so much for you, Elena. Be grateful. All the times I paid for family vacations or covered bills without being asked. They weren't just emotionally distant. They had been protecting a lie while quietly taking what was meant for me. If you've ever had the ground shift beneath you and suddenly seen your entire childhood in a different light, you know how disorienting it feels. It's not loud anger. It's a deep, quiet recalibration of everything you thought you owed people. I looked at Grandpa. His hands were trembling slightly, the after effects of the stroke still lingering. "I'm sorry I waited so long," he whispered. "I was afraid of what it would do to the family." I took his cold hands in mine, the same hands that had guided me while baking cookies, the same hands that once placed Caroline's locket around my neck. "You gave me the truth tonight," I said softly. "That's more than anyone else ever has." That was the moment I made my choice. I wasn't going to scream or confront them in tears. I wasn't going to demand explanations or beg for the love they had withheld. I had spent my career reading hidden financial trails. Now I would read the one that mattered most, my own. I didn't sleep much that night. After Grandpa dozed off on the couch under a warm blanket, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the remnants of the dinner no one came to eat. I opened my laptop and began the way I always do when a case feels personal, with a blank spreadsheet and a quiet resolve. I listed every suspicious transfer Grandpa could remember. I noted dates, amounts, and the careful wording in the memo lines. I photographed the birth certificate, the letter, and the trust note. I created a new folder on my computer titled simply Caroline. By morning, the snow had stopped falling, but something inside me had begun to move forward with purpose. I wasn't the grateful charity case anymore. I was Caroline's daughter. And I was going to protect what little she had left behind, starting with the man who had loved us both. If you've ever reached a point where being quiet no longer feels like weakness but like strategy, you understand where I was that Christmas morning. I didn't know yet how deep the betrayal went, but I knew I would find out, slowly, carefully, and completely. The girl who once tried so hard to earn a seat at the table had finally realized she didn't need their permission to stand. The days after Christmas blurred together in a quiet kind of determination. I went back to work, answered emails, reviewed client files, but my mind was somewhere else, tracing the invisible threads that had been pulling my life for decades. Victoria had always been careful. She wasn't the shouting, dramatic type. She was elegant, composed, the kind of woman who could deliver the most cutting remark with a soft smile and a cup of coffee. After losing her own baby that terrible winter, she agreed to raise me, but on her terms. She wanted control, she wanted the narrative, and for 33 years, she maintained both beautifully. She made sure I knew my place without ever raising her voice. "Elena, we've been so blessed to have you," she would say, usually right after I had spent the weekend helping with taxes or watching my siblings' kids. It sounded like gratitude, but it was really a reminder, you owe us. Marcus and Lauren followed her lead. My brother was charming and irresponsible, always needing a little help with money or logistics. Lauren was the golden child, pretty, social, the one whose photos filled the family albums. They both benefited from the story that I was the lucky outsider. It kept them comfortable. It kept me useful. But now I saw the pattern differently. Grandpa Walter had signed a durable power of attorney 6 weeks after his stroke last spring. Victoria had presented it as a simple precaution, "Just so I can help with the bills while you recover, Dad." He trusted her. He was foggy from the hospital stay, scared of becoming a burden, and she was there with the papers, gentle and efficient. What started as helping quickly became something else. I began reviewing the bank statements Grandpa had brought me that night. What I found wasn't sloppy theft. It was smart, calculated, and wrapped in plausible deniability. Small transfers at first, a few thousand here and there labeled as family support or medical expenses, then larger ones. Marcus got money for a new truck he said was needed for work. Lauren received funds for home renovations on a house that wasn't even in Grandpa's name. Victoria herself had moved money into accounts she controlled, always with careful memos that would look innocent to anyone who wasn't looking closely. And then there was Caroline's trust, the one my mother had built with her own earnings as a single mom cleaning houses. It had been folded into Grandpa's main accounts years ago. Victoria knew exactly what it was. She had access to all the old paperwork, and she drained it anyway. If you've ever watched someone you thought you knew slowly dismantle the one person who truly protected you, you understand the cold anger that settles in your bones. It's not the explosive kind. It's the kind that makes you sit straighter and think clearer. Victoria wasn't evil in the cartoon sense. She was human and deeply wounded. Losing her baby broke something in her. Raising another woman's child in that same house of grief became a daily reminder of what she lost. Over time, that pain twisted into resentment and entitlement. She convinced herself that she deserved compensation for the life she had sacrificed. Marcus and Lauren became extensions of that justification. They were her real children, after all. I was just the obligation she had turned into an asset. One evening I called Grandpa to check on him. His voice was tired but clear. "She keeps bringing me papers to sign," he admitted. "I don't always understand them anymore, but I trust her, or at least I did." I didn't tell him everything I had found yet. I simply said, "Grandpa, from now on, don't sign anything without me looking at it first. Can you do that for me?" He agreed, and in that small promise I felt the first real shift of power. I wasn't going to rush in with accusations. That's what they expected from the emotional, grateful Elena they had shaped. Instead, I did what I do best. I documented, I organized. I built the quiet case that numbers and dates and paper trails can never lie about. Victoria had spent years playing the long game, erasing Caroline's memory, rewriting my story, securing her children's future at the expense of an old man's dignity and a dead woman's wishes. She was very good at it. But I was better. The weeks that followed Christmas were some of the quietest and most intense of my life. During the day, I was still Elena Harper, the reliable forensic accountant, who clients trusted with their most complicated financial messes. But at night, after the world went to sleep, I became something else. A daughter quietly reclaiming what had been taken from her mother. I set up a dedicated workspace at my kitchen table, the same one where I had eaten alone on Christmas Eve. Grandpa would come over a couple of evenings a week when he felt strong enough. He'd sit across from me with a cup of herbal tea, sharing whatever details he could remember about the papers Victoria had him sign. His memory wasn't perfect anymore, but his heart was. And that was enough. I started with the bank statements, page after page of careful, methodical transfers. Nothing flashy or obviously criminal, that's what made it so chilling. Victoria was smart. Every withdrawal had a memo that sounded reasonable. Family assistance, home maintenance, medical support for Walter. But when I cross-referenced them with actual expenses, the story didn't add up. Marcus's new truck, paid for with money from Grandpa's care account. Lauren's kitchen remodel, covered by loans that were never documented or repaid. And the worst part, thousands of dollars from Caroline's trust fund had gone toward Victoria's personal credit cards and a vacation the family took to Hawaii last summer. A trip I wasn't invited to, of course. If you've ever stayed up until 3 a.m. staring at spreadsheets while your chest feels tight, you know the strange loneliness of uncovering betrayal in silence. I didn't cry much during those nights. Instead, I felt a deep, focused calm settle over me. Every new piece of evidence wasn't just data, it was proof that the story I had been told about myself was a lie. Between the numbers, I kept returning to Caroline's letter. I read it so many times the paper started to feel soft at the edges. She wrote about being scared as a single mother, about working double shifts cleaning houses so she could save for my future. She described how my tiny hand would wrap around her finger and not let go. She called me her greatest gift. Those words hit differently at 2 a.m. when the house was completely still. Here was a woman who had loved me fiercely in the short time she had, while the woman who raised me had spent decades making sure I felt like I was borrowing space in their lives. The contrast broke something open inside me, not in a destructive way but in a clarifying one. I began keeping a detailed binder, Tab 1, Power of Attorney document, Tab 2, Timeline of transfers with dates, amounts, and recipients, Tab 3, Caroline's letter and trust notes, Tab 4, Medical records showing Grandpa's declining capacity after the stroke. I scanned everything, backed it up in 3 different places, and added my own handwritten notes in the margins. This wasn't revenge yet, this was preparation. Victoria, of course, sensed something was shifting. She called me one afternoon while I was reviewing statements at my office. "Elena, honey," she said in that honey-sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "Your grandfather mentioned you've been helping with his papers. That's so thoughtful of you, but I have everything under control. You know how confused he gets these days." I kept my voice steady, the same tone I use with difficult clients. "He asked me to look, Victoria, and I'm looking." There was the slightest pause on her end. "Well, just don't stress him out. We're family, we handle these things together." Family, that word used to make me soften. Now it felt like a key turning in a lock I no longer wanted to open. I didn't argue, I simply said, "I understand," and ended the call. Then I added the conversation date and summary to my binder. Following the money in silence gave me something I had never really had before: control. Not loud control, not dramatic showdowns. Just the slow, patient power of knowing the truth before anyone else realized I knew it. Every late night spent at that kitchen table, every page I tabbed, every quiet conversation with Grandpa, it was me finally stepping into the role Caroline had hoped I would grow into. Strong. Clear-eyed, unapologetic. The girl who once baked cookies hoping someone would notice was gone. In her place was a woman who understood that some truths don't need to be shouted, they just need to be documented. And I was only getting started. As January turned into February, the pieces continued to fall into place, each one heavier than the last. The most painful discovery wasn't the money spent on trucks or vacations, it was the house. Caroline's house. The modest two-story home on the edge of Colorado Springs where my mother had grown up, where she had brought me home from the hospital as a newborn, and where Grandpa Walter had lived for over 50 years. It was the last physical piece of her that remained. The backyard still had the old swing set Grandpa built for her. The kitchen still carried the faint scent of her spiced sugar cookies in my memory. That house wasn't just property, it was history, it was home in the truest sense. And Victoria was trying to sell it. I found the listing hidden in Grandpa's email account, which Victoria had full access to through the power of attorney. A real estate agent had already been out to appraise it. The half-drafted purchase agreement sat in Victoria's cloud drive, ready for Grandpa's signature on one of his foggy afternoons. The plan was clear: sell the house quickly, use the proceeds to support the family, and move Grandpa into a smaller assisted living facility closer to her control. She was erasing the last traces of Caroline, while Grandpa was still alive to watch it happen. That realization hit me harder than any bank transfer. I drove out to the house one quiet Sunday afternoon when I knew Victoria and the others would be busy. Grandpa was waiting for me on the porch, wrapped in a thick sweater despite the cold. We walked through the rooms together slowly. He pointed out the spot in the living room where Caroline used to play piano, the corner of the kitchen where she taught him her cookie recipe. "This was supposed to be yours one day," he said, his voice cracking. "Caroline wrote it in her will. Victoria knew. She's always known." I stood in my mother's childhood bedroom, now turned into a storage room, and felt a wave of protective anger I had never allowed myself before. This wasn't just theft. This was the final deletion of my mother's existence, and mine along with it. If you've ever watched someone try to sell the only place that ever felt like it carried your real story, you understand the fire it lights inside you. Not the kind that makes you scream. The kind that makes you stand taller and move smarter. I didn't confront Victoria that day. Instead, I took more photos. I documented the condition of the house. I had Grandpa write and date a clear statement while he was lucid. "I do not wish to sell my home. I want Elena to help me review all decisions." I recorded him saying it on my phone, with the date and time visible. That evening, Victoria called again. Her voice had lost some of its usual sweetness. "Elena, I hear you've been visiting your grandfather's house. This is getting out of hand. He's old. He needs stability, not confusion. We're trying to do what's best for everyone." I answered calmly, the same way I'd speak to a client trying to hide assets. What's best for Grandpa is not selling the only home he has left, especially not Caroline's home. There was a long silence. When she spoke again, the mask slipped just a little. "You've always been dramatic about these things. After everything we've done for you." I cut her off gently but firmly. "I know what you've done, and I'm making sure it stops." I hung up first, my hands were steady. For the first time in my life, I wasn't shrinking back or trying to keep the peace. I was drawing a line, not with anger but with truth and preparation. The house that should have been a bridge to my mother was now the battlefield. Victoria was moving fast, trying to close the sale before anyone could interfere. But I was moving faster in my own quiet way. Every document I added to the binder, every conversation I recorded, every late night spent building this case brought me closer to the moment when the truth would finally speak louder than their lies. The girl who once baked cookies to earn love was now protecting the only thing her real mother had left. And I wasn't going to fail her. By mid-February, I had stopped pretending everything was normal. I still went to work, still smiled in meetings, still answered family group chats with polite one-word replies, but inside I was building something much more powerful than anger. I was building proof. I reached out to Joan Peterson, an elder law attorney in downtown Colorado Springs who specialized in financial exploitation cases. I had found her through a quiet recommendation from a colleague who once helped a client in a similar situation. Our first meeting was in her cozy office filled with books and plants. I laid everything out on her conference table: the birth certificate, Caroline's letter, Grandpa's handwritten note about the trust, the bank statements, the power of attorney, and the draft sale documents for the house. Joan listened without interrupting, her reading glasses perched on her nose. When I finished, she leaned back and said something I'll never forget. "Elena, what you're describing isn't just family drama. This is potential elder financial abuse, breach of fiduciary duty, and possible undue influence. You've done the hardest part already. You've documented it calmly while they thought you were still playing the grateful daughter. That validation meant more than she knew. For weeks I had wondered if I was overreacting, if the little girl inside me was still desperate for their approval. But Joan's words reminded me I was doing exactly what a good forensic accountant and a protective daughter should do. Together we created the official plan. First, get Grandpa's clear, documented consent while he had a strong day. We visited him together one sunny afternoon. With Joan as witness, he signed a new limited power of attorney, giving me authority to investigate, and a written statement confirming he wanted full transparency on all his accounts. His hand was shaky, but his mind was clear. I want the truth, he told us. No more papers I don't understand. From that day forward, the binder became my quiet companion. I upgraded it from a simple folder to a professional tabbed masterpiece that would hold up in any courtroom. Tab 1, Legal Documents, the original birth certificate, Caroline's letter, the trust note, and Grandpa's new consent forms. Tab 2, Medical Records, showing the timeline of his stroke and declining capacity. Tab 3, Financial Timeline, a meticulously color-coded spreadsheet with every suspicious transfer supported by bank statements and screenshots. Tab 4, The House, photos, the draft purchase agreement, and Grandpa's statement refusing to sell. Tab 5, Communications, dated summaries of every call and text with Victoria where she tried to discourage my involvement. I worked on it every evening. Sometimes Grandpa would sit with me, sharing memories of Caroline that filled in emotional gaps the documents couldn't show. Other nights I worked alone, the only sound the turning of pages and the soft click of my laptop. There were moments when the weight of it all felt crushing. Reading how Caroline's hard-earned money had paid for Lauren's luxury handbag or Marcus's gaming setup. But every time doubt crept in, I would touch the silver locket I had started wearing again under my shirt. It reminded me who I was really fighting for. If you've ever had to prepare in silence while the people who hurt you continued living as if nothing was wrong, you know how lonely and empowering it feels at the same time. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't making scenes. I was simply refusing to let their version of reality stand unchallenged. Victoria tried to maintain control. She dropped by Grandpa's house more often, bringing his favorite meals and reminding him how stressful it was to have me asking so many questions. But Grandpa on his clearer days would gently push back, and I kept documenting every interaction. The binder wasn't just paper, it was the voice I had never been allowed to use growing up. It was Caroline's love made visible. It was the calm, undeniable proof that I was no longer the charity case they had shaped me to be. By the end of February, the binder was nearly complete, thick, organized, and devastating in its quiet precision. Joan reviewed it and gave me one of her rare smiles. This is one of the cleanest cases I've seen. Now we take the next step. I closed the binder that night and rested my hand on top of it. For the first time in 35 years, I felt like I wasn't just surviving my family. I was preparing to stand up in it. With the binder complete, the next step felt both terrifying and inevitable. Joan and I filed for emergency relief in early March. We weren't asking for punishment yet. We were asking the court to stop the bleeding while the full investigation unfolded. The petition was carefully worded, every claim nailed to a document in the binder. We requested 3 things: a temporary suspension of Victoria's power of attorney, a freeze on any sale of Grandpa's house, and a formal accounting of every transaction since the stroke. Joan warned me it could take days or even weeks for a judge to respond. In the meantime, Victoria still had access to some accounts. Those were the hardest days. I kept my routine normal on the surface, but inside I was holding my breath. I visited Grandpa more often, sometimes just sitting with him on the porch of Caroline's house, talking about anything except the case. He would squeeze my hand and say, "You're doing what she would have done, sweetheart." Those words kept me steady. Victoria knew something was coming. She started calling more frequently, her tone shifting between sweet concern and quiet threats. One evening she called while I was reviewing the final draft of the petition with Joan. "Elena, this has gone far enough," she said, the honey gone from her voice. "You're upsetting your grandfather. You're tearing this family apart over some old story. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I let the silence stretch for a moment, then answered in the calmest tone I could manage. "I'm not tearing anything apart, Victoria. I'm protecting the man who protected me when no one else would, and I have the documents to prove it." She laughed, short and sharp. "Documents? You've always been so dramatic with your numbers. He's an old man. He gets confused. No one will believe you over me." That call ended like the others. me hanging up first, then immediately adding the conversation to the binder under tab 5. Each attempt she made to intimidate me only added another page of evidence. 2 days later, the court responded faster than we expected. Joan called me while I was driving home from work. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the satisfaction in it. "We have a temporary order, Elena. The power of attorney is suspended immediately. The house sale is frozen." The judge read your binder and agreed there's enough concern for emergency protection while the full accounting proceeds. I had to pull my car over to the side of the road because my eyes filled with tears. Not tears of victory, but of relief. The kind you feel when someone finally sees the truth you've been carrying alone. For the first time, the system that had always seemed to favor the loudest or the closest blood relative was standing between my grandfather and the people who were quietly dismantling his life. That night I drove to Grandpa's house and showed him the court order. He read it slowly, then looked up at me with clearer eyes than I had seen in months. "You did this," he said. "For both of us, for Caroline." We sat together in the living room of the house that was now safe, at least for now. I didn't celebrate loudly. There were no dramatic confrontations. I simply made him a cup of tea and baked a small batch of spiced sugar cookies, using Caroline's recipe. The scent filled the kitchen like a promise kept. If you've ever fought a battle in silence and finally seen the first real sign that your quiet strength is working, you know how grounding that moment feels. It wasn't over. Victoria and the others would still have their chance to respond. Adult Protective Services had been notified. The full accounting was coming. But the emergency order bought us time and protection. I spent the next few days preparing mentally for what was coming. I knew the birthday party for Grandpa's 80th was approaching, the one Victoria was organizing at the house as a performance of devoted caregiving. I wasn't invited, of course, but I was going anyway. The binder was ready, my nerves were steady, and for the first time in my life I wasn't walking into a family gathering as the grateful outsider. I was walking in as Caroline's daughter, with the truth in my hands and the law at my back. Grandpa's 80th birthday arrived on a crisp March afternoon. Victoria had planned it like a coronation, a big celebration at Caroline's house, with relatives, neighbors, and old church friends. She wanted the world to see her as the perfect, devoted daughter-in-law caring for an aging man. I wasn't invited, that didn't surprise me anymore. But I was going anyway. I dressed simply but deliberately, a soft gray sweater and black pants, Caroline's silver locket visible at my neck. In one hand I carried the heavy binder. In the other, a fresh batch of spiced sugar cookies, still warm, baked with extra cardamom the way my mother once did. I drove to the house knowing exactly what I was walking into. The party noise spilled out onto the street, laughter, music, clinking glasses. When I opened the front door without knocking, the room went still. Victoria saw me first, her smile froze. Marcus nearly dropped his drink. Lauren looked away. "What are you doing here?" Victoria hissed as she approached quickly, keeping her voice low so the guests wouldn't hear. "This is family only, you need to leave." Before I could answer, Grandpa's voice cut through the entire room, stronger than I had heard it in months. "Elena stays." He had pushed himself up from his chair at the head of the table, one hand gripping the armrest. His eyes were clear that day. "A gift. She stays," he repeated. "And the rest of you are going to sit down and listen to what she has to say." The word granddaughter didn't need to be spoken, everyone felt it. I walked to the long dining table, set with Victoria's best china, and placed the binder down gently. Then I set the plate of warm cookies beside it. The familiar scent drifted through the quiet room, like a memory refusing to be erased. "Most of you don't know the full story," I began, my voice calm and steady, the same tone I used in client meetings. "So let me start at the beginning." I opened the binder to the first tab. "I am Caroline Harper's daughter, not adopted out of kindness, not a charity case. I was brought home after my mother died in a car accident when I was 2. This family chose to hide that truth from me for 33 years. I turned pages slowly, reading facts, not accusations, dates, amounts, transfers, the drained trust fund my mother had built with her own hands, the power of attorney used for personal gain. The attempt to sell this very house, Caroline's house, while Grandpa was still living in it. Victoria's face went from pale to flushed. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice rising. "You've always been ungrateful, Elena, after everything we did for you." I didn't raise my voice, I simply turned another page. "Here is the court's temporary order," I said, holding up the stamped document. "Victoria's power of attorney has been suspended, the house sale is frozen, a full accounting is underway, and Adult Protective Services has been notified." At that moment, Joan Peterson stepped forward from the side of the room, calm and professional. "I'm Elena's attorney. Everything in that binder has already been filed with the court." The room was completely silent, except for the soft ticking of the old grandfather clock. Ruth, Grandpa's longtime neighbor who had known Caroline as a girl, had tears in her eyes. Several church friends looked shocked. Grandpa reached out and took my hand. "She's my granddaughter," he said clearly to everyone, "Caroline's girl, and she's the only one who has protected me instead of using me." Victoria tried one last time, her voice cracking. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I replied gently, "I'm just refusing to let it stay broken in silence." I didn't stay for cake or small talk. I had said what needed to be said. I hugged Grandpa, promised to return the next day, and left with the same quiet dignity I had walked in with. The weeks that followed brought the slow machinery of real justice. The court appointed a neutral fiduciary to manage Grandpa's affairs. Some of the money was returned. The house remained safe. Victoria never apologized, but her control was gone. Marcus and Lauren kept their distance. I didn't chase them. I simply stopped holding the door open. This past Christmas Eve, I set the table again. 8 places, but this time filled with people who chose me. Grandpa sat at the head. Ruth came with stories about my mother. Joan joined us, along with a couple of close friends and neighbors who had become real family. We ate, laughed, and remembered Caroline without shame. I finally understood what Grandpa had been trying to teach me all those years with the cookie dough under our hands. Family isn't the people who share your blood or sign the papers. It's the ones who show up when the table is cold, who tell you the truth even when it's hard, and who love you without making you earn it. If you've ever felt like you had to prove your worth to the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally, I see you. You don't have to keep shrinking yourself. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand up quietly, gather your truth, and build your own table. The candles burned low that night, but the light felt warm and full. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't eating alone.